Welcome back. It's time to check out our worldviews. Who are we? Why are we? We're going to get philosophical. We're going to get existential. And so I hope you're excited to join me in this endeavor. So let's go ahead and get started with some of our critical thinking and analytical thinking and introspective thinking right now. Okay, here we go. Here we go. All right, here's the definition. So first and foremost, before we get to the definition, I want you to think about, how do you define worldview? What does that even mean to you? And what do you think? And without just parsing the word up, it's how we view the world. Yeah, but what does that mean? What does that look like? What does that entail? So are a few definitions, dictionary definitions, right? These are the denotative definitions, the denotations. A particular philosophy of life, or a conception of the world, or a comprehensive conception or apprehension of the world, especially from a specific standpoint. So I kind of like, they're just subtly different, but I kind of like a combo of the two, right? And I want us to think about, can we have an overarching worldview that influences the way we view everything, but can we also have sort of smaller worldviews? And I know that probably doesn't sound logical or make sense, but if we have one overarching philosophy or conception of the world, can that inform more specific parts of our existence and how we apprehend the world from a particular standpoint? So whether it's social, whether it's political, whether it's spiritual, we might have this worldview that is the lens through which we look at everything that we encounter. But can we also maybe have different worldviews about different issues? So I want you to keep that in mind and see if that makes sense to you or doesn't make sense to you as we move forward. So how do you think worldviews function? And I want us to consider it in terms of, oh, I'm sorry, I'm looking up at the screen where the PowerPoint is. So when I look up, it's not me rolling my eyes or anything, it's me looking at that. So how does it function? Well, I want you to think about it. It's a uniting framework that ties everything together. It also allows us to understand society, the world, and our place in it. A worldview also helps us to make critical decisions, which will ultimately help shape our future. And we'll talk about futurology in just a few moments. It helps us to synthesize the wisdom gathered in different scientific disciplines, philosophies, and religions. It provides us with a holistic picture, right? We have a holistic view of the whole. We look at everything before we take it apart. Ultimately, it helps us to understand and therefore cope with complexity and change. And finally, it's that lens through which we look and come to conclusions and judgments about the world and all that it encompasses around us. So I want you to think about, are there any worldviews that you can think of? In the last few years, we've had a lot of people holding some different worldviews about race, about gender, about equality or inequality, right? Could those stem from or be a part of any sort of worldviews. So I want you to keep that in mind. Where do our worldviews originate? In other words, what in your life helps you to create your own worldview? Can our worldviews be created from nothing or from scratch? Do we come out of the womb with a worldview? Uh, if we and so I think we can all acknowledge that there are building blocks, that we don't just come out saying, I believe this to be true about the world. I hold this spiritual perspective. I adhere to this scientific principle, right? So, if we need building blocks to help us create our worldviews, of what do you think those building blocks are comprised? And I want us to think about where you gained your building blocks for your overarching worldview, but also your worldview about politics, your worldview about education, your worldview, and I know that I'm sort of using that broadly, but does it still fit? Are there theories, models, concepts, guidelines, and values scattered over the different disciplines and ideologies that help to inform our worldviews? Uh, do you think, and notice I'm already asking the question, look at the way I asked this question. Where are the more positive building blocks found, the more negative? That again is expecting you to agree to the hidden assumption that there are positive building blocks and there are negative building blocks, right? But do you think there are? And this question is a tricky question because it very much depends on who you are as a person and some of what your experience is, right? When we get to the nature versus nurture topic and issue that is consistently debated, some of us might say our parents are positive building blocks. We have really involved, engaged, loving, compassionate, caring parents. Others of us might say our parents are the more negative building blocks because they have been less than compassionate, less than kind. In fact, they've maybe been abusive and harmful, right? And some of us might say, we don't know who our parents are, and so we have a different sort of caregiver who is who is our building block. So some of us might say educators in our lives, spiritual leaders in our lives, they would be the positive building blocks. But yet again, others of us might say it's the certain educators or certain spiritual leaders who have helped to create, been a more negative impact on our worldview. So I really want us to acknowledge how individual, even understanding what the positive and negative building blocks might be. But could we say that knowledge, logic, reason, some of these things might be some of the positive building blocks? I want us to see this connection between our worldviews and our values. They're essentially linked, right? And I love this question, and hopefully you're gonna grapple with it and take off with it in your discussion board post and replies number 2. But what is good and what is evil, and how do we know? Is it our worldview that helps us to inform it? And this is where we can get really philosophical. Is there even anything such as good and evil? Can we know goodness without knowing evil? Can we know evil without knowing goodness? And so this is a lot of fun, and I hope that you'll pick up with it in your discussion a little bit later. But ultimately, when we're thinking about a worldview, it does include an element of morality and ethics in the sense that it becomes a system of rules that tell us how we should or should not behave. And I want you to consider this on a couple of different levels. You've got your own personal morality and ethics. As a society, do we have an element of morality and ethics that we agree upon? And are those reflected in the laws that are made to which we are beholden? Uh, are there some social, moral, and ethical questions that maybe aren't encompassed that way? Do some of us have spiritual beliefs that and values that inform our system of rules? But does everybody hold to that same religion? So do we all have those same rules? And are there some morality? Is there some morality or ethics that just as members of humankind that we might agree to or not? And so this is a lot of fun, right? It gets your creative and your critical thinking juices flowing. So I think the other element of the worldview that is important is, and its connection to the values, is that our values also give us a sense of purpose and direction. It becomes a set of goals that guide our actions, right? You, in order to glean a worldview or seek one, we should consider the questions why and what for. And I want us to really ponder this for a second, because how often do we still ask why or what for? Is that sort of socialized out of us? What kind of child were you? And what happened with even the caregiver or parent in your life? When you would ask why? Uh, I heard because I said so, or I don't know, stop it, right? Because sometimes people would get stumped. Uh, and so, do we learn somehow that we need to stop asking why? But should we, as critical thinkers, shouldn't we keep asking why and what for? And do our values help us to understand the whys and the what fors of some things? Uh, our answers to the aforementioned questions may help us understand what the meaning of life is for us, right? And the role our worldviews play in that meaning. So I want you to consider different examples of worldviews that express values, and what sort of values do they express. Uh, if we have white supremacists, there are different worldviews that white supremacists hold, and what values does that express? There are also values of people who uh, want to seek equality for all. And what values do they express? Uh, there are values about seeing all human beings as having value, right? In and of themselves, having worth. And so, what values are behind that worldview of sort of the humanity perspective in that way? Just to name a few possible worldviews. So, knowledge influences worldviews. Worldviews stem out of the amount of, or the lack of, the amount of knowledge that an individual possesses. And the more knowledge and information we have on a given topic, the more informed our worldview will be. And this is why I think it's so important for us to take some time and be introspective, especially early on in this class, to understand, what do we value? What do we believe to be true about people, places, and things in the world? And upon what foundation are our worldviews about people and places and things based? And how logical are those foundations? Are those foundations based in reason? And then we need to evaluate that, right? And then we need to seek out why or why not these worldviews, these values, these beliefs are worthy, especially when it comes time for argument, right? We also want to, with knowledge, we should be able to distinguish between better theories from worse theories. And what does it, how much evidence is there to prove the different theories? Uh, who is putting forward these theories? How credible are they? Right? Go back to the ethos that we discussed in the critical thinking and argument presentation. Uh, so, our informed worldview should try to answer the traditional philosophical question, what is true and what is false? And as much as we have some really interesting and mixed messages about this concept right now, about true and false, there are actual things that are verifiable and things that are not verifiable. And if things are not verifiable, they're not true, right? And I'm not speaking about spirituality. Spirituality is a little bit off to the side from this, right? Faith is off to the side from this in terms of faith is based in something a little bit different than from this. But what I'm more speaking about is logic, reason, argumentation, uh, and sort of reality and not reality in this earthly world. Yes? So I want you to think about worldviews that you think are uninformed. There's a lot of conspiracy theories out there, and some are more informed than others, but even by being called conspiracy theories, they sometimes are not always super informed. But we want to think about what sorts of worldviews there might be that fit within that realm. Are there any negative aspects of uninformed worldviews? Think about this, especially for people who aren't critical thinkers. We already talked about critical thinking and argument and how if we aren't thinking critically, we can be manipulated by people who are misusing critical thinking, right, and argumentation. And so, if there's uninformed worldviews, can that create harm for people? Can it, for lots of people? Think about vilifying different people. Think about wars and different things that might transpire. Uh, so, I want us to talk about futurology. And what is futurology? Just like our values help to inform and compose our worldviews, we talked about where they come from, what they are, whether they're informed or not. Uh, but then, and we talked about how they direct us. But what is futurology? It's another component of the worldview in terms of, in that it deals with future studies, the study of the future, and it helps to, so it enables our worldview attempts to model and plan the development of the future of humanity, right? So there is a correlation between the two. When pondering worldview, we should look forward to see what various worldviews, where the various worldviews will take us, as well as individuals, as individuals. If we adhere to this worldview, where will that take us in the future? If we take this worldview to its logical extent and the logical end of this worldview, but also where will it take us as a society? And so that's what the encourages us to look forward is about. We should answer to where are we going? And to where will our worldview take us? Those are some questions that we want to acknowledge and look forward to. A given worldview should give us a list of possibilities of more or less probable future developments. So if we are arguing to act this way based one way based off of one worldview, where will we get? How will that push us forward into the future? Uh, but this will confront us with a choice. Which of the alternative future opportunities should we promote and which should we avoid? Currently, what current worldviews do we want to promote? We hear a lot of people talk about world peace, right? We talk about people ending world hunger. Are those worldviews? What are they based in? Would those be things we might want to promote? I mentioned white supremacists and racism earlier. Would those be worldviews that we might want to avoid? And go down and think forward about the future and go down the logical progression of thought. What would the world look like if we promoted one thing and we avoided another? So, is simply having our worldview enough? Is it enough to navel gaze and philosophize, although it's so much fun and it's so stimulating? Is it enough? And you're going to find, go back to the first week of class, care, think, act, right? I'm always going to be pushing this, and I want us to think about, does striving to achieve one's worldview equate to knowing how to realize one's worldview? Keep that in mind again. Just because we strive for it, we argue for it, does it automatically mean we know how to make it come into fruition? And so that's where critical thinking and argumentation comes into play, right? I want us to think about how the connection between our worldviews and how our worldviews should cause us to ponder the question, how should we act? If we hold this worldview, what should our actions look like? So I think we've all known some hypocrites and maybe even been hypocritical ourselves if we're being honest in the past. But if we say that we believe A to be true and our actions don't align with that worldview or A that we espouse, then there's a disconnect, right? So that's something else to think about. Not only what will happen and what will likely happen in the future if a particular worldview is employed by the majority of humans. Let's think in America, because this is where we are, right? But we also want to think about, if I tell you this is my worldview, how ought I to act to reflect that worldview, right? And knowing leads to action. So care, think, act, right? And then that thinking, that knowledge, we shouldn't just be inactive, right? Can our world views, especially uninformed worldviews, lead to inaction? So what happens, and I want you to think about some of the worldviews we've been discussing and what happens if we are in a space of inaction. And does it even matter? I want to allow you space to ponder that idea as well. So there are a couple of worldviews in this cartoon, and I like to use Far Side quite a bit. This is, it says the beaten path, off the beaten path. I don't know if this is such a wise thing to do, George. So what worldview do you think these people hold about the beaten path? Do they think the beaten path is good and right, even though they kind of have not super excited faces? They're just going on the beaten path. Do they think that, do you think that they're being critical thinkers or followers? But either way, are they valuing it? And then we have this person with George over here because the mouth's open, so we're imagining that this person's speaking to George. But this is off the beaten path. What do we know about being off the beaten path? And what do we know about the worldview about being off the beaten path? Do fewer people take it? Does it seem a little bit scary? I don't know if this is a wise thing to do. Is being off the beaten path always wise? Is being on the beaten path wise? But notice it's these folks's and even your worldview about the beaten path, being on it or off it, that will inform how you will interpret this implicit argument, right? In this cartoon, it's making an argument. And do you think the argument is about going off of the beaten path? Are people thinking differently or more if they go off the beaten path? How about this worldview? What worldview do you think is being presented here? You want to look at, and again, I think your own worldview about people who wear business suits, about nature, about technology will inform your interpretation. But do we see that these trees are clothed in what looks like business suits? And if we might think that that has to do with business folks or maybe even capitalism. We've got these drops that could be bubbles, they could be sort of glass, they could be raindrops, they could be tears, depending upon what your interpretation is. We've also got this technological sort of doohickey of sorts with a light, with electricity, and things connected to each of, not always the heart, but to each of these. So could this be pro-environmentalism? Could this be pro-business? Could this somehow, whatever your interpretation is, it's saying something about environmentalism, right? And a worldview. And some might say if we're going with tears and we're going with suits, then corporations are building technologies off of the environmental resources, which could be harming the environment, right? Others of you might have a more pro business stance, and that you might see a more symbiotic relationship. So I think, again, it depends on what your worldview is about these things. Interestingly, this is a Dr. Seuss cartoon, and I'm wondering if it sort of has as much meaning today as it did when Dr. Seuss would have been creating this. But we've got a couple of different worldviews. So it says what this country needs is a good mental insecticide. Again, a line of people. And who's this? This is Uncle Sam, right? The representative, one of the major representatives of America. And some could maybe see this as American government. And then you've got a citizen here. And then you've got what looks like an insecticide going inside and out. And then there's a bug and it says racial prejudice bug. And then you have the citizen asking, gracious, was that in my head? So we've got a couple of different things happening here, right? One is there's a worldview about what looks like the majority of Americans in America. And that is that they've all got the racial prejudice bug in their head, right? And that they might not realize that they have the racial prejudice bug. So that's one sort of worldview being presented. And we can also see an argument about that, right? This is an implicit argument. Because the major claim is what this country needs is a good mental insecticide. And so it's broadening it to, country, right? So all the people in the country. But what's interesting too, and this is where I'll be interested to know what you think, and maybe you'll share it in your discussion board. But with Uncle Sam here, what is he? Is it up to the government to get into our heads to help us recognize and eliminate the racial prejudice bug? And so this is interesting, depending upon your worldview. What is the role of our government? Um, how much mental control should the government have? Yet, if we agree that the racial prejudice bug is not acceptable, how do we get rid of it? Remember, I said earlier, if we have a worldview, we might hold a worldview, but might not know how to realize that worldview. Is allowing the government to help us with the insecticide and getting the racial prejudice bug out of our head? Um, is that one of the ways to help us realize that worldview of equality for all in America? I don't know. And again, that's going to come from your own worldview, right? About what you think the role is of the government in America, as well as whether or not you agree with that premise. So go forth, contemplate your varied worldviews, their building blocks, and your own values and beliefs, and how they might inform your critical thinking and your argumentation moving forward. See you soon. Take care until next time.